Here are 7 of the craziest conspiracy theories ever shared on the Joe Rogan Experience Podcast. Starting with episode 1852, where Joe Rogan is shocked by this crazy Admiral Byrd theory.
Well, so the U.S. government's like, something's going on with Antarctica. There's some activity up there. We want to find out what's going on. So they send this cat named Admiral Byrd up to investigate with a giant fleet. And according to his journal that they found much later, he met with UFOs, Nazi UFOs.
Nazi UFOs. The Nazis had a flying saucer.
Had made a deal, basically, working with for technology, and the deal was they were going to work together, okay? So basically the aliens go down, and that's where they say Eisenhower made a deal. They could kidnap people and do experiments, but they couldn't just do it anywhere. They had specific places, which were our national forests. The missing 411, which is all these people have mysteriously disappeared in force.
On episode 1169, Elon Musk talks about the simulation theory.
This could be some simulation.
It could. Do you entertain that?
The argument for the simulation, I think, is quite strong, because if you assume any improvement at all over time, any improvement, 1%, 0.1%, just extend the time frame, make it 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Civilization, if you count it, if you're very generous, civilization is maybe 7,000 or 8,000 years old, if you count it from the first writing. This is nothing. This is nothing. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then games will be indistinguishable from reality, or civilization will end. One of those two things will occur. Therefore, we are most likely in a simulation.
Or we could most certainly be on the road.
We could be in base reality.
We could be here now on our way to the destination where this can never happen again, where we are completely ingrained in some sort of an artificial technology or some sort of a symbiotic relationship with the internet or the next level of sharing information. But right now we're not there yet. That's possible too, right? It's possible that a simulation is one day going to be inevitable, that we're going to have something that's indistinguishable from regular reality. But maybe we're not there yet. That's also possible.
On episode 2014, Joe Rogan shares his theory about Jeffrey Epstein's death.
The Epstein thing is nuts. It's nuts that they put that woman in jail for sex trafficking to no one. Who are the people? There's no list. You have no idea. There's no disclosure.
List, right?
But the fact that no one's asking for that, and the people that were involved in these crimes have never been brought to justice or even discussed, and it's just something that just gets swept under the table. There's no outcry. There's no people demanding an investigation to find out what the fuck happened. There's real clear evidence that he was murdered, and everyone's trying to say, oh, it was just suicide. And like, oh, the cameras didn't work. No big deal. That's nuts. That's crazy. There's clear evidence that they did that in front of everybody's face. They killed that guy. He knew too much.
Who do you think killed him?
Who knows? I mean, the cameras were off. They probably sent in an assassin who strangled him and then made it look like it was some kind of a suicide attempt.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Baden, the autopsy doctor from the HBO series,
Yeah.
he investigated the autopsy, and he said the contusions, the ligature marks on his neck were indicative of someone being strangled. He also said the break of the bones, or the type of break that happens when someone's being strangled, not when someone's being hung. When you're hung, it's your body weight that is hanging you, so it's usually on the upper side of your neck. But this was down on the bottom of his neck, where he's getting strangled by somebody. And the bones in his neck were broken, which is what happens when you get strangled, and doesn't happen when you get hung.
On episode 2018, Joe Rogan talks to Post Malone about the younger Dryas impact theory.
You talked about the younger Dryas.
Yeah.
And I was watching a thing recently, actually, about how they think that the Egyptians just found the pyramids.
For sure, the Egyptians made it because it was in Egypt. I think what we're saying is they're people from a different era.
Yes, sir.
And this is the whole proposal that Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson have.
Yes, sir.
With that younger Dryas impact theory. It's about time. The whole issue is about time. And what they believe is that somewhere around 11,800 years ago, and probably a couple other times, we got obliterated by comet impacts. Comet fragments slammed into the earth, and there's a lot of evidence of this. Physical evidence of iridium, levels of iridium, nanodiamonds that happen on impact. What they believe is that this ended the Ice Age, and this is what caused all the melting of the ice caps that were above North America, and that's where all this massive flooding came from, and that's where the Great Lakes come from. And he thinks that it was a civilization-ending event where very few people survived, and they essentially had to rebuild from there. And so the amazing society that built the pyramids, whoever those people were, by the time this Younger Dryas impact thing happens, who knows what kind of civilization they had at that. But they might have been far more advanced than us.
Sure.
Just in a different way.
Sure.
And for sure they knew how to move stone in a way we still don't understand.
Right.
We have no idea how they did that. No idea how they made 2,300,000 stones meet perfectly at the top and then covered in smooth limestone. It's insane.
And channel energy and vibrate inside of the pyramid to channel an energy.
Who knows what they were doing?
It's crazy.
During episode 1266 of the Joe Rogan Experience Podcast, war reporter Ben Anderson explains the White Helmets conspiracy theory.
There are some fairly serious people saying the White Helmets are some kind of media front for Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra.
Would you explain the White Helmets for people?
So when there's a bombing and a building collapses, they go in and drag people out and get them medical attention as quick as possible.
And people think that they're somehow or another involved in it? They're a front?
Yeah, the footage is faked in order to drum up sympathy for the rebel-held areas.
When the very people that are calling it, the very people that have boots on the ground and that are in these war zones and calling these things, when they become cynical and they become jaded, that's when it gets really, really sketchy. We rely so heavily on people like you. I'm not going over there.
Yeah.
You know, Jamie's not going over there. Like, I know people that have gone to Venezuela and they come back and they go, I don't know what the fuck is going on over there. I don't know who to believe. I don't understand it. Venezuela is a very strange one. The real problem is you have two sides. You have two different versions of what's happening. And if you're not educated in that country and you don't understand their politics, it's very difficult to figure out who's telling the truth.
Yeah.
On episode 2010, entrepreneur Mark Andreessen shares the Laurel Canyon conspiracy.
Laurel Canyon is actually where the hippie movement started. There was like this moment where it's like Jim Morrison, The Doors, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Frank Zappa, and was it John Phillips, and the Monkees, and like all of these like iconic bands of that time basically catalyzed over about a 2-year period on Laurel Canyon. Conspiracy theory in this book is that the whole thing was an op. The evidence for the theory is that there was an Air Force military propaganda production facility at the head of Laurel Canyon called Lookout Mountain. In that era, in the 50s through the 70s, it was a production facility for film and music. So there were 3 parts to the conspiracy theory. So one is they had the production facility right there, right where all these musicians showed up. 2 is the musicians, like a very large percentage of these young musicians, were sons and daughters of senior U.S. military and intelligence officials.
Including Morrison.
Including Jim Morrison, whose father was the head of naval operations for the Vietnam War at the time. 3rd is the head of the Rand Corporation, who was one of the inspirations for the Dr. Strangelove character in the movie. So he was the guy doing all the nuclear planning for nuclear war. He lived right in the heart of the hippies in Laurel Canyon. The anti-war movement before the hippies was basically a square movement. The hippie movement and rock and roll and the drug culture of the 60s was developed in order to basically sabotage the anti-war movement.
On episode 2018, Joe Rogan explains the stoned ape theory.
Have you ever heard of the stoned ape theory?
No, sir.
The stoned ape theories is there's this guy who's this he was an ethnobotanist and like a psychedelic guru. His name was Terence McKenna. And Terence McKenna had this theory. There's a lot of interesting things about it, but it's about the doubling of the human brain size. Apparently, the doubling of the human brain size is the biggest mystery in the entire fossil record because it happened fairly quickly. It happened over a period of like 2 million years. So what happened was that climate changed and the rainforest receded into grasslands. And so a lot of these hominids came out of the trees and they started experimenting with different food sources. These mushrooms grew on cow shit. So they've observed all these different primates flipping over cow patties and eating beetles and grubs on them. And they would probably experiment with the mushrooms that grow on them. And his thought was that mushrooms in low doses increase visual acuity, so it makes you a better hunter. It emphasizes a sense of community, so it'd make you like have better tribal interactions. It makes people horny. That would benefit breeding. But it's essentially that some of the elements that and how psilocybin interacts with your mind, it helps the facilitation of language. And he thinks that all those things coincided with climate change. As these rainforests receded, these lower hominids came out, tried mushrooms, started eating them, and kept eating them for millions of years. And that was a part of the diet. And it probably gave them a lot of ideas for how to make tools. It probably gave them ideas like how to harness fire. And he thinks it's the source of human evolution.
If you enjoyed these conspiracies, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel.